This is Rachel Kehoe for Art Concepts and Practices with Professor Slaughter, and today I will be doing my contemporary artist presentation on this American photographer. His name is Robert Adams. He was born in 1931 and is still alive. He was born in New Jersey, but he moved to and grew up in Denver, Colorado, which is actually really important to his photography and his art. Robert Adams does a lot of photography of landscapes and just kind of like desert structures. So it's like one structure in the middle of nowhere. So at first I thought he was taking photography just to be aesthetically pleasing. I know that a lot of people, or at least I've noticed that a lot of photographers who are landscape photographers do so because it is quite gorgeous. And that's not anything bad. It's actually something that I appreciate. But it's just, I never really looked before at a landscape photo for more meaning. And that's actually something that I really enjoyed about researching Robert Adams, was just that his photos have more meaning, and I think that will encourage me further on in my life to really look for a deeper meaning in photography. So kind of starting from that point of being like, well, this is just a lot of landscape photography, I looked for an article that was about Robert Adams, and I found one called Resisting the Temptation to Give Up, James Baldwin, Robert Adams, and the Disavowal of the American Way of Life. This is from the African American Review and is written by Leigh Miracore. This particular article kind of, it discusses two artists, and one is like a literature artist and one is Robert Adams, but they both kind of have a similar ideology. So she has a quote in her article about this particular photograph that Robert Adams has taken. This one's called Colorado Springs, and moving forward, a lot of the photos are named after the places these are taken. So this photo is a 60s, 70s house, and it has a woman in it, and she's alone, solemn in this house, and she seems to be just kind of existing within the house. So a quote that Leigh Miracore includes in her article from Robert Adams is, "The developments, being suburban developments of houses, filled with people who had migrated west in search of a new Eden, only to discover themselves isolated in an artificial landscape. People had moved to Denver to enjoy nature, but found that nature was mostly inaccessible except for on the weekends." And I think that's really poignant, because they were going west because it's natural, it's like unbuilt up, and they moved into these developments they're just developed places, they're not natural. Further adding, Leigh adds her own remarks, saying that the woman in the house really represents Americans just kind of imprisoned in their own dreams, their own American dream, and their way of life. And so, I mean, the American dream, everyone knows about it pretty much, is, you have a family, you have a nice job, you have a nice house, and you just live in that freedom. But is it really freedom if you are trapped within the confines of American civilization? And I think that's what Robert Adams was really trying to point out. So moving forward from that, I feel as though those statements from both Robert and from Leigh really got me thinking in the right mindset for looking further into Robert Adams' photography. So I found one that was a similar photo that would help me transition into his other art. So this one is called Longmont, Colorado. And again, we see a woman in her house who seems to be existing within her house. But compared to this photo, I find that Longmont has a much more solemn mood to it. I think that just comes from the dark. It's clearly dark outside when he takes this photo. And I think that I think that this light over here is a television, and I think that further illuminates the American way of life. I mean, who doesn't have a TV and who doesn't just sit down and watch TV, And I think that it portrays a similar message of Americans being trapped within their American dream. But I also think that this one doesn't kind of slap you across the face with it, and I think it really shows his take on it, and that he's sad that this is happening, and so it's melancholy to him, and I think that is shown by the darkness around her. Also, I would like to note that she doesn't seem particularly happy doing this, watching TV. She seems as though she's just blankly staring, and who doesn't do that? That's just how you watch TV, and I think that's something Robert was trying to point out with that. So, furthermore, we have some other things that Robert was really trying to push forward. One of the things that Leigh Miracourt had tried to point out was that a lot of Robert's photography has to do with a highlight of post-war, that being World War II, consumerism. A lot of his photography was done in the 60s and 70s in Colorado. Some of them are in California, but we're focusing on Colorado here. And how there was this suburban migration away from the rural areas that had started happening in the industrialist era, but really happened, suburbia became a thing after World War II, and how the consumerism and the suburban migration subsequently led to an alienation of humans within their society. And I think that this photo, it's called Pikes Peak, really highlights that. I think that this really highlights you can see this is a gas station, and in the background we see this vast open mountain range. And I think that it just kind of highlights that we do live in these little spheres of civilization, and that we live in these little spheres of like domestic life that we're afraid to leave. And we exist within these spheres where we just stay within our town. So say if you lived in a town that was in the middle of nowhere, you would stay within that town. And I feel like as though that probably definitely heightened after World War II. It was starting before then, as I've noted, but it definitely happened after World War II. And I think that this photo really definitely highlights that fact. And lastly, we have one more thing that Leigh had noted about that Robert Adams, part of his ideology, was that after the war, capitalism and profit mentality had really taken over, and to quote her, that it created a shared language centered on how to acquire more things instead of relationships with other people in the natural world we inhabit. And I think that definitely, again, that started in the industrialist era, but became more of a norm, more of just what the American society was consumerist, capitalists, and just profit-driven. And I chose this photo called Burning Oil Sludge. I mean, it is burning oil sludge. It's just what it is in the middle of this desert, to really highlight the consumerist values that have been, that were really front and center during this era. And so it seems to be barren. There's nothing around, but it is a desert. This is an ecosystem, and this just shows that we're willing to let this happen. It's burning, it's creating some sort of pollution into the air, and also probably a hazardous environment for whoever is working around here. And we would rather have to deal with those risks than to really think about the natural world that we are within. So, altogether, Robert Adams has a really big critique on American society, how that alienates us, and how that really pushes profit-driven margins, and just how we are just so within our own little spheres, away from and disconnected from the natural world around us, and just the world around us in general, because of suburbanization, like that suburban migration, and just being so focused on the American dream, which is quite a profit-driven dream. You want to have a nice house, you want to have a nice car, you want to have nice things for your family, and you want to have a nice job. So altogether, Robert really just likes to point that out and show his opinion on it. I think that Robert, being born in 1937, really got to see that transition, and it was really apparent to him. And I think that it is really important for us today, who had been born in the 90s and the 2000s, to really take a step back and look at that ourselves. And we can do that so much more easily and assisted through the photography of Robert Adams and artists like Robert Adams. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and I hope you guys have a great day.